Welcome to episode 28 of WooWoo for the Skeptic. I'm Kim Polander, your host and curiosity advocate for the world of metaphysics. In today's society, the second biggest reason couples break up is finances. Whether you have a lot of it or a little of it, budgeting and financial planning can carry a lot of emotional charge. There's a lot of focus these days about manifesting, how to do it, when to do it, blaming yourself when you can't do it, but where's the focus on managing the money you already have? As my guest today will explain, how you manage what money you do have is a big indicator of how you manage everything else in your life. If you're curious about your emotional blocks to making or managing money, then today's interview may give you a new perspective on conscious spending and a mindful approach to managing your money. My guest today is Mindy Crary from my old stomping grounds of Seattle. Mindy is a certified financial planner who offers holistic guidance to clients of all levels of income. She has over 16 years in the financial industry with a master's in business as well as coaching certifications, and she focuses on supporting you through the emotional roller coaster of making tough decisions around your money and coaching you through a decision instead of selling you one. And I love that her title in her company is Founder and Director of Advice. Mindy, thank you so much for being on the show and welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, why don't you first tell the listener how you took an interest in financial planning?
Oh, man. I almost feel like when I came on financial planning, I came upon my mission because I had just completed my master's in business and, I'd been going on interviews and nothing was really clicking for me. And a friend of mine was going to attend one of those info nights in financial planning. And I went to it and they described what it is. And fundamentally, financial planning sounds fantastic because, you're helping people figure out every aspect of their life and supporting them through that process. And so immediately that vision clicked with me. And so I started with basically the broker dealer that was representing that info night and quickly found that the application of financial services doesn't always meet the vision of financial services. And so basically spent probably the next 6 years figuring that out and really coming to the point that I realized that I wasn't going to find my own personal way of doing things while still constrained by a broker-dealer. And so that was kind of the impetus for then starting to experiment and starting to offer financial planning in a more holistic way that completely separated it from kind of the product sales and asset management stuff that most people assume are kind of the breadth of financial planning. And so, yeah, I get to delve a lot more into kind of the frustrations and the reactions and also all aspects of finances versus just the ones that financial services typically want to sell people, which is typically an investment or a life insurance or some kind of a product.
Yeah. So when you say holistic for the listener, how would you explain like the other aspects that aren't traditionally offered by planners?
Yeah, well, okay, so there are always 6 areas of financial planning. And so now that I've put myself on the spot, I literally have to count these on my fingers. So there's financial foundation, which is, cash flow, debt, cash reserves. There is risk management, which is just a fancy name for insurance. There is goal planning, which is, something specific. I want to buy a house. I want to send my kids to college. I want to take a sabbatical. So there's something that is associated with money that you have to work out how that's going to happen. The 4th area is retirement planning. The 5th area is tax planning and investment planning. And then the final area is estate planning, which is really making sure that everybody knows how they want to pass wealth on in the best way possible. So when I say holistic planning, what I find is most financial planners are really only focusing on retirement planning, risk planning, and tax investment planning. And for me, what I've really found is your cash flow cash reserves, debt management, that stuff drives everything else. So I always say that the single greatest indicator of your future wealth is your ability to save money. And that happens from income in, expenses out, what's left over. And so I think that's the real opportunity that a lot of financial planners are missing, is really helping people nail down what is my month in, month out reality, and how can I basically, I always say, turn the cruise ship around to really get the best use of every dollar coming in and going in my household, so that I have money for emergencies. I have money to take a really awesome vacation once a year. And integrating those kinds of short-term, more pressing needs into the overall 360-degree view of somebody's finances.
I think most people know that, oh, I should be saving every month. I should be doing this, and still can't. And I love the approach of the holistic, how it all is going to feed into the big picture. What do you come across that are kind of the biggest challenges for someone? Like, they come in, you give them a plan, and then the follow-up to that plan, kind of like maybe following a diet?
Totally. So that's exactly it, because I can show someone the potential or the possibility, but then it's the execution. And so I always think the easiest part of financial planning is, here, open up this account and roll over your old IRA into it, or, just kind of the very bare bones stuff. But then the opportunity part. So, after reviewing 3 months of your kind of transactions and looking at your pay stubs, I think you're able to save $1,000 a month, or I think you're able to save 500, or wow, you've got tight cash flow because you've got 2 kids. Let's try to save $100 a month. And so I'm always going into it with a hypothesis, but then I think the most challenging part of that is the commitment to really ongoing clarity, because I'm handing them a piece of clarity about their situation. And then the challenge, or the element of possibility, is, wow, let's realize this possibility. And I fully acknowledge that life gets in the way. But to me, it really is kind of that recommitment to clarity, that either every week for a few minutes or every other week for a few minutes, that you're really looking at that and trying to work on that habit of capturing excess cash flow and putting it someplace so that you can start to get into the habit of feeling like, yeah, this is actually something that makes me feel good, and something that's good for me, and something that's going to help me reach my goals that much faster.
Well, let's just talk a little bit about, have you ever noticed maybe how emotional blocks or other factors, kind of non-financial factors, fit into the financial health of someone's?
Totally. So what I compare, kind of financial momentum to is a lot like what I compare, or I use the analogy of like improving your health, because the worst part for a lot of people for health improvement is stepping on the scale after you haven't stepped on the scale for a really long time. And it's not the number on the scale, it's everything that you tell yourself about that number. So I'll run into people all the time that just don't, I'll say, get it set up on mint.com, or, just log into your bank and look at your transactions for 5 minutes a week. And there are so many people who think of that action the way a lot of people, myself included, think about stepping on the scale when you haven't done it in a while. And I want people to get over this idea that it's not the number, it's what you're telling yourself about the number. Because really, the reality is, when I remind myself, it's actually better to step on the scale more often, because that diffuses the emotional reaction. And it also motivates me to eat healthier and maintain my exercise program. And so I think the same thing is true of people who regularly expose themselves or regularly commit to just getting that piece of clarity. But I recognize, that it's so easy with everything that happens in life to, if you're not making a commitment or you're not putting it on your calendar, to just being like, oh yeah, I didn't do that this week, because nothing earth-shattering happens if you don't do it, So, it's not like if you don't step on the scale, suddenly your clothes don't fit. And so the corollary to that is that if you're not paying attention to your money, you're just not going to have any more than you started with, or maybe you'll go into debt next time that there's an emergency. So, the action of clarity, or the lack of action, isn't immediately apparent. The pain actually comes when suddenly something happens and you don't have the resources the way you want to have the resources to do what you want, or to respond to something unexpected in the way you want.
Yeah, I can totally relate to the not wanting to step on the scale analogy, because I used to have tons of credit card debt. And the longer I went into not logging into my bank accounts, like the more pressure built of that dread of logging in, like what's going on. And so I do agree that when I look back at that time, if I did touch base more often, it wasn't so traumatic to log in.
Ah. Well, and I find too that sometimes people have so much shame around that they almost don't even want to, they're uncomfortable showing me. And I've seen so many different things that honestly, nothing phases me anymore. And so I'll go through and I'll do something like, here's a debt payoff plan or a debt snowball. And it sounds so dry and, debt payoff plan. But what I find is when I show people that, the debt actually ends up getting paid off a lot sooner than they imagined it would be. And so then suddenly you don't feel so stuck about it. You're like, oh, there is this possibility of having a life and enjoying and being able to go out to eat once in a while. I don't have to completely restrict myself until this debt is paid off. And, for the next 5 years, there's not going to be any fun. So really, like anything, I try to support balance, so that it isn't that, the debt is only one aspect of somebody's situation. Just like I would tell somebody with their health, the weight is only one aspect of your situation. Yeah, you might be carrying a couple extra pounds, but how awesome is it that you worked out 4 times this week, or you ate healthy, so really it's the context, I think, more than anything.
Yeah. And getting back to clarity, showing them that it's going to take this much time to get out of debt, and having that open their eyes, so to speak, because I remember that happened to me.
Yeah, totally.
Now, you talk about logging into your bank accounts, checking your transactions, taking 5 minutes or so. When people think about money management, I think, at least for me, I used to think, oh, this is going to take so much time. I can't even start. So do you have any advice for people who are thinking, I just don't have the time to do this?
Yeah. So it's funny you say that. So I'll tell you the story, and then I'll tell you what my advice is. And years ago, I created this ebook called Conscious Spending. It's like 50 pages. It talks about the philosophy of, really not focusing on the money you're spending, focusing on the experience. Because what I found is once people start assessing their experiences, they actually spent less money, because then they realized, I don't want to get that crappy takeout at that place on the corner. I want to save my money and have a really nice meal with my family, just as an example. But what I was laughing about is, what I realized is that probably my passion for the topic at a 50-page ebook does not match people's need to have a quick and easy system to get this stuff done. So recently, I consolidated all of my ideas about that into conscious spending in 30 minutes or less. So what I realized is just what I'm doing already is that I'm not, you think a financial planner is so in love with her numbers. Oh, let's go into mint.com and spend, 2 hours looking at my spending. And that's not the reality. So for me, the reality is, I go in, mint.com is where I track my spending. I also think YNAB stands for You Need a Budget, has a great system. But I go into Mint, I set the timer on my phone for 15 minutes. I go into the trends tab is kind of where they say, here's your spending month to date. And I click around, and maybe I do some categorization, or, make sure that they remember some transactions so I don't have to recategorize, a specific vendor, that it's just auto categorized. And yeah, so my process really is 15 minutes in Mint, and it used to be 15 minutes a week. And what I've noticed over the past year is really I kind of match it up to my bill paying schedule. So, I'll go into Mint, I'll see the spending, I'll pay my bills, and really I've shifted less from a week, just because, the way my bills go, I shifted from a weekly to a biweekly process. And so 15 minutes every other week gives me clarity. And really what I'm looking at is I'm not looking at a dollar amount. So with Mint, what I say is that if you don't like how much money you spent on, and we'll just say eating out, because that's a constant thing that I look at, I don't say, oh, Mindy, next month you're only allowed to spend $200 on going out. I actually say, okay, Mindy, you went out, and let's just say 12 times over the past month, and you didn't like your financial results when you went out 12 times in a month. So next month, you're going to go out 8 times. And so for me, it's easier to track a behavior than it is to track a dollar amount, because I am only going in like bi-weekly at this point. So that process, just kind of getting the clarity, only takes about 15 minutes a week or every other week. And then identifying what your next actions or behaviors are associated with, what clarity you found. To me, that can be a relatively simple process.
Yeah, I like that about mentioning the word behavior, like even looking back at your schedule, like seeing maybe a surge in spending money and, what was going on at that time, and like tracking the motivation behind the spending or making money, what kind of a mood were you in or what happened, maybe some personal work that you did and created some shifts. But can you explain a little bit about what mint.com is or how people could utilize that?
Yeah, so mint.com it's a free, so I will call it an account aggregation service, which means that you could hook up every single one of your accounts to mint.com. So you could hook up your 401k, you could hook up your student loans, your mortgage, your bank accounts, and everything would flow into Mint. And so I'll say, theoretically, I'll coordinate. And so I'll give you a little bit of history of Mint. So Mint's been around since 2005. About 2009-10, Intuit actually purchased them. And so Intuit is I always say, kind of a financial monster in a good way, because Intuit is responsible for Quicken and QuickBooks and a lot of bookkeeping software and also TurboTax software. So Mint actually basically enjoys the same kind of technology security that TurboTax and QuickBooks and Quicken. And so if people are concerned about having their info online, I say, well, and knock on wood, because never say never, but I believe it's relatively secure, not knowing a whole lot about the technology. But so basically what I recommend with Mint is only hooking up the accounts you're spending from. Because what I have found is that if you have all of your stuff in Mint, a little bit that gets to be a distraction, because let's pretend somebody has a huge student loan. Well, every time you log into Mint, all of the accounts update and you kind of have an overview over on the left. So what I think happens to people is they say, oh man, look at that student loan. Oh, that student loan, it's making me feel so bad. And then they forget why they were in Mint, which was really to just track their spending. And so what I always say is, do it simply as possible. Just hook up the accounts that are going to help you get clarity over your spending. Your monthly payment to your student loan, or what your payment's going to be to your mortgage or whatever else, or your car payment or whatever. So you don't need to have those in Mint. You really just need to have the spending clarity. And the reason Mint is free, so I'll just mention this too, is because when you log in, there will be advertisements like, hey, open up your IRA here, or they'll say, we noticed a lot of transactions associated with gas. You might want this gas card. Honestly, after being in Mint for, going on 12 years now in 2017, I don't even notice that stuff anymore. So I think it's a pretty easy system. The other thing that I really like about Mint is, if I go on vacation, or I think about August or December, which are typically months where I'm traveling a lot, I'm not looking at Mint. I'm not worrying about it. And what I like about Mint is that you can ignore it and then pick it up again And nothing, you don't have to start from scratch all over again because the accounts are still connected. Yeah, so that's a difference for me with Mint that I don't notice with a lot of other systems. A lot of times with spending tracking, if you stop doing it, if you drop it for a month or a couple of months, you have to kind of start all over again. But Mint, it can just kind of be going on in the background, and you can pick it up or drop it as it's useful to you.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of any services like that where it hooks right into your bank account, because that's why I stopped using Quicken or whatever software I was using. Was I'd fall behind on entering receipts, and then at that point it was just, this is taking too much time. So,
oh yeah, nuts.
Yeah, that's a great concept. Now, getting back to kind of how you do your business and the aspect of coaching someone through a decision instead of just, hey, you should invest in this. Can you go into a little bit more about your experiences with clients? And you mentioned shame, stories behind money, or some of the biggest challenges that you've dealt with.
Yeah, I feel like my client base kind of separates into two groups of people. There are people who want specific technical, and I'll call it financial plannery advice. And so the coaching through decision is really about understanding their values, their priorities, and preferences, and really following a line of inquiry to identify with what decisions and what's the savings priority, and where are they going to be most comfortable, and where are they going to be able to most easily implement. And so it really, for me, is kind of matching somebody's values to where should they be kind of financially organized. And so that process can just happen a little bit on its own. Now, a lot of times I am the first person that a client has ever worked with their finances. And so to me, in a very kind of, I think, collaborative way, I'm really kind of figuratively leading somebody by the hand into this world and helping them get started in a really mindful way so that they can do that. And so that's one service, is really kind of the technical financial planner side of it. Then the other side of it is really more of the money coaching. And so that, to me, is very much, I was trained just in general life coaching from the Martha Beck Institute. And, I'm not certified in the work, but I'm a huge fan of Byron Katie. And so a little bit then what happens is there is another coaching aspect that talks about money block coaching. And to me, it's kind of funny because at the start of the year, I am seeing so many advertisements for money block coaching in my Facebook feed. I'm like, I don't need to do this. There's so many people doing this. But a little bit, I'm finding, and I think most of the time, those clients end up having some kind of either entrepreneurial leaning or entrepreneurial background. And it really is encouraging people to really challenge the different mental blocks they have. And the way that I do it, so this is completely unfinancial plannery, I relate it to your chakra system and the 7 major chakras in the chakra system. And the reason I do that isn't because I have so much background in chakras. It's just that I realized that the 7 major chakras a lot of times are aligned with the people's challenges about money. And so we can go into examples and everything else. But for me, somebody might say that they have a money block about charging what they're worth. And so there might be 3 standard pieces of advice that most money coaches go through with that. But what I find is that they might have, trouble charging what they're worth because maybe they don't feel powerful enough. They don't feel like they're seen enough. And so that's a solar plexus thing. But, it might also be they don't charge what they're worth because they're afraid that nobody would buy from them if they actually charged what they wanted to charge. And so that's more foundational. That's survival and root chakra stuff. So definitely what I start to do with the money block coaching is try to kind of delve into that and for me, it becomes, I always say that there's a lot of kind of standard money block strategies, but for me, it really is about getting to the core issue that's causing either the fear or the avoidance or what have you, so that as people move forward, they actually have a context and a way to kind of continually self-manage themselves. So it's not just the money block statement or the money block idea. It's, oh, not only is that about this, but this is also radiating out into other areas of my life. I always say how you do money is how you do everything. And so the money block is actually an opportunity to show up in your life in a lot of different ways, in a better way for yourself.
That's fascinating. I mean, I've never heard a financial planner use the word chakras along the same sentences as money. So I think that's awesome. So a client would come in, let's say they have this block. Let's say, like, when your clients come in, do they already know that you have this energetic, we'll call it, approach to money?
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It kind of depends on how they find me, because a lot of times I'm in Seattle, and so I get a lot of word of mouth business just for the financial planner stuff. But if they're, more online, or if that's how they kind of came about, then definitely they're aware of kind of what I call kind of the money chakra stuff. And so, a lot of times, depending on availability and everything else, somebody will, basically the process is either I want to engage in financial planning, let's hop on the phone and see what that looks like, or I want to engage in some money chakra coaching, let's hop on the phone and see what that looks like. And so that's always the process. And so then it's a discovery process of, what is the chief focus? And then for me, financial planning, I've been doing that for so long. It's definitely a specific process that I take everybody through while respecting their uniqueness. And then with the money chakra coaching, there's tools and there's basically things that I prescribe even more specifically because, coaching money blocks and the internal things that are going on that affect your outer world, to me, that is much more challenging than coming up with investment recommendations for your old IRA.
Right, exactly. So you find the issue, maybe associate the energetic block that might be contributing to it. At that point, would you send them home with homework like you need to do, here are some tips to help you work on your solar plexus or your root chakra? How would that look for the client once they identify what the block might be?
Yeah. So I have workbooks and I give them all the workbooks because what I find is even if I say you have a solar plexus issue, everyone wants to look at all the workbooks anyway. So you basically can have all seven chakra workbooks. Yeah, what I do is I diagnose, I say these are kind of the next exercises that I think would work for you from the workbook. What I also find, just my general prescription for anybody is to basically take about 15 minutes twice a day and just get calm with yourself, sit in a place for 15 minutes, which I find is much more difficult for most people than they would realize, in the morning and then at night. And just journal for about 15 minutes about, what were your challenges? What were the things that were happening today? What were the things that triggered you? And with a couple of calls, then, we might even uncover other things, or it might support the original assumption. And so I never assume that somebody only has money blocks associated with one chakra, because I almost describe it as a spiral staircase. You might come back around with a money block, but it's not going to be the same problem you had with a money block as you had the last time you worked on it. So I always think, because I'm such an introvert, I have a lot of, I would say, throat chakra issues about speaking my truth and speaking up. And if I talked to you about that 10 years ago, it was about being afraid of speaking up and speaking up about who I was when I worked with a broker dealer. And I still feel like I have trouble kind of speaking up and, shouting my mission from the rooftops, but it's a much different issue than it was 10 years ago when I was working on it. So that's why I kind of describe this stuff as a spiral staircase, is that, the hope is with your money blocks, you might always have kind of the same area of money block, but the hope is that you're evolving as you go. And the more and more kind of clarity and groundedness you can bring to it, which I think journaling helps with, the more you're going to kind of release that as you consciously want to let go of those money blocks and those ideas.
Let's say the listener is really not that familiar with chakras, hasn't done that much work around it. Can you maybe go through some of the more common issues, identify the chakra and how that would play out in a person's life as money? We'll just stick with money blocks.
Yeah, totally. So, the root chakra is the base chakra. It's red. And that usually is associated with issues of survival. Typically, what happens with people with root chakra issues, interestingly, you would think that somebody concerned with issues of survival would just be stuffing money away. But that's almost never the issue. The issue with people who have survival chakra issues, root chakra issues, is really the fundamental issue of having enough money for everything you need. And a lot of times I find that the thing behind that is really going back into your history and seeing what kind of messages were you getting from parents or other significant people in your life as you were growing up. And I literally, God knows how many years ago, when I started looking at all this stuff for myself, I literally went through year by year of my life and said, what do I remember about that year? What do I remember about that year? And even without focusing it on money, stuff started to emerge. And so that would be kind of, if somebody thinks they have survival issues or they feel like they never have enough money, then that would be the first thing I would tell them to do, is start to go through, just journal through your life year by year and see what you remember about those things. The next area is the sacral chakra. So that's the next one up, and it's orange in color. The sacral chakra, it's funny because most chakra stuff you'll read, it's like about sex. And really, what I think it's about is more than sex. It's more about your relationship with other people. And it's also about your relationship with pleasure. The biggest one that I find that people have the money block is about deserving. And this idea that they don't have to overfunction or they don't have to do anything to deserve money. And what I find with people who have sacral chakra issues is that they will essentially give their money away. They always put other people before them because for some reason they don't feel like they deserve the money. And so a lot of times the other thing I find with sacral chakra people is that they might, and this is very specific, but there might be a history of some kind of chemical dependence in their family. And that causes people to act codependently. So, you're not just responsible for your emotions and reactions, you're also responsible for everybody around you. And so when you get into that, that codependency or also control freakishness, then it almost is you're never able to allow yourself to enjoy or allow yourself to just have things without first making sure that everyone else around you is taken care of first. And so the step, and it's super hard for people, is to start your day, and this is part of kind of the journaling, saying, what would my day look like today if I put myself first? And it's that whole kind of, I'm sure you've heard the analogy about when you're on an airplane, you put your oxygen mask on first so that you can better help the people around you. And that's the lesson that the sacral chakra people have to learn, is that they actually can give more of themselves when they give to themselves before they give to others. So then the next one is the solar plexus. And so that's yellow. And the solar plexus is about personal power. And I think the idea of personal power is, I think it's misunderstood sometimes. And especially in our world right now, we think about power as being somebody like Trump, and basically this idea that stuff, a lot of stuff has to happen around you, and stuff has to get done. But really, I would love for people to adopt almost a more passive idea of power, that, you can be powerful without doing anything at all. And think about, I think about somebody like Mother Teresa, who a lot gets done around her, but it's not like she's over functioning and rushing around trying to get it done. And so a lot of people with money blocks with the solar plexus, again, this might be charging what you're worth, or really, I think, setting boundaries with people. And so if you don't think you're powerful, and this is, I always say this is the entrepreneur thing, but if you don't really kind of ground yourself in your own power, then if a client or let's say a prospect comes in and says, I can't afford to pay you this fee, will you accept this much? You might say, oh, okay, she's right. I'm not worth that. Okay, I'll accept that. And so think of an employee. So an employee was like, I would like a raise. But if the boss says, no, I can't do a raise right now, then the person with personal power is going to say, okay, well, I'm not getting what I need here, so I need to go figure out how I will get what I need. But a person lacking in personal power is waiting for somebody else to give them what they want. And so the shift that the solar plexus money block people have to make is, it's a little bit of the putting themselves first, but it's also really understanding that they are the source of whatever they want. And so it's this idea of, and their meditation then, or their journal is, who am I waiting on for my perfect life to emerge? And so are you waiting on your boss to promote you? Are you waiting on your spouse to allow you? Are you waiting on, if you're an entrepreneur, are you waiting on some clients to renew their contract? And so what would your life look like if you made it all happen? And if you weren't waiting on these people, if you knew that these people are never going to come through for you and you need to come through for yourself, what does that look like? The next one is the Heart Chakra. And so the Heart Chakra, I think, is super interesting because the Heart Chakra is really about self-love. And with self-love, the way I interpret that on a money level is also kind of your dreams. And so the biggest money block that I see with the Heart Chakra is people aren't really admitting or realizing or connecting to a future vision for themselves. And so if you ask somebody, oh, where do you want to see yourself in 5 years? If that comes really easily, then they're probably fine with the Heart Chakra. But, I just spoke to somebody yesterday. She's like, I can't even see 6 months ahead. And what that tells me is that that person isn't connected into their own dreams. And what that usually means is that they're afraid to express what they want because it's probably going to interfere with what somebody else wants around them. And so I see that a lot of times, unfortunately, in relationships. And so that was a little bit of the example yesterday, was that her husband actually had so much of his own anxiety about money that she kind of squelched her desire in order to kind of reassure him and make sure that he felt good about the path they were on. And so because she was kind of a little bit putting his desires or dreams before her own, she wasn't really able to connect in and see what she wants. And the reality is that, so that kind of first prescription or that process is the journaling is really trying to connect yourself more and more and more and more to what you want, independent of what anybody else wants. So what people jump to is, oh no, I can't have that because that's in direct conflict with what this other person in my life wants. But, that's not the way things usually work. The way things usually work is that you get to be completely clear and completely open about what you want in life. And eventually it will work out because we have no idea what the future holds. And nothing is hurt or damaged by being open about those things. The fear is that it will be damaged, that your relationship will blow up or something else will happen. But what happens more often is that you get to be happier because you get to honor your dreams as well as honor the dreams of your family. So that one definitely is a process for people. The next one is the Throat Chakra. And so the Throat Chakra is about speaking your personal truth. And so that is usually what I see. I see the money blocks a lot of times. Well, I think about it in an employee situation where you are scared to death of saying what you really think about something because you need this job. And, I think about the throat chakra thing because that was kind of the one that I went through, is that I felt like if I really let them know who I really was, that I wouldn't fit in, and I wasn't fitting in anyway, so who cares? But really, for me, my journey was fun when I finally connected to my truth and I finally was super upfront and honest about this is who I am. Nothing drastic happened, but suddenly my life started rearranging itself to give me the opportunities I needed to move into my own thing. And so the throat chakra thing, the fear is if you're speaking your truth, if you're really admitting who you are and being kind of genuine about that, that you're going to lose opportunities, that you're, not going to fit in, and you're not going to be offered the same opportunities if you just keep your mouth shut and kind of conform. But what I found is the reality is the more you say who you are and you're honest about that, and people get to know your own unique self, there are actually more opportunities. I mean, I think about, I didn't always have a throat chakra issue. When I was going to get my master's before financial services, I actually worked as a marketing person in a civil engineering firm. And because I didn't really care about the job, I was just kind of having a job while I went to get my master's. I just spoke my truth all the time. And I would say, I think that's a silly policy, or I don't know why you're doing that. And the owners loved me because more than anybody else, I would tell them what I thought because I wasn't afraid of losing my job. So people are usually surprised that when they start speaking their truth, they're actually end up attracting more to them than when they're keeping their mouth shut or trying to squelch that.
Yeah, and I think the throat chakra is such a stickler for so many people. It goes hand in hand with the overgiving aspect.
Yeah, totally. So the next two, so third eye and crown chakra. So really, when you talk about your chakras, the lower ones, the root, the sacral, the solar plexus, those are kind of the real world. This is how you're showing up in the real world. And then the heart chakra is kind of the transition between real world and internal world. And so then throat, third eye, and crown chakra are more the internal world. And so third eye is about trusting yourself. And really the third eye, a lot of times in kind of the more traditional chakra courses, is about intuition. But third eye is really about trusting that the things that you want, the decisions that you're attracted to making are the right ones for you, and not second guessing yourself all the time. And so you can imagine that somebody could go in circles with themselves about trusting or not trusting themselves for their next action. And then because they're so caught up in that, they never actually get to real world action. So, in my world, then maybe they're attracted to a possibility, but then they're never trusting themselves enough to make that possibility real. And so really for people who are having that, implementation, really, making their dreams happen, that to me, it's almost more like their journaling almost has to become a little bit like, what is the one thing that I'm going to do today to move myself toward this vision that I want? And trusting that even if they take the wrong action, that it's not like it's knocking down 200 dominoes. Even if they take the wrong action, they can still adjust and adapt and it'll work out. So
yeah, that's a good point too, because especially with manifestation, a lot of people get paralyzed by not wanting to take action due to fear, or that something needs to fall in their lap. Well, I'm going to manifest this. It just needs to show up on my doorstep, when really you need to take that first step, let the universe or whatever you believe in support you, but they need to know where you're going. So
yeah, totally. Yeah. And then the crown chakra is about, I think about universal trust, because, with the third eye, it's trusting yourself. With the crown chakra, that's usually kind of the connection to the spiritual world. It's at the top of your head. It's getting divine information, downloads. And if somebody's blocked with that, then they're really not trusting that they're in a safe world that they can move forward with. And my best example of that one is, and this isn't actually somebody I worked with, this is a friend of mine talking about her husband, that She kept saying before they were married, she's like, okay, we're getting married. When? And he would say, when we have 10,000 in the bank. And okay, so they got there, they got married, and then, okay, we're having a kid when? And he's like, when we have 20,000 in the bank. And what she realized, because she really wanted a kid. So she looked all around and she's like, oh, between all of our accounts, we already have 20,000. And so then he wasn't like, great, let's have a kid. He was like, then let's do 30,000. And so it's this mistrust that everything around you is going to, you either think that the universe is working for you or against you. And really, it's about the Crown Chakra block is about building this trust again that, whatever happens, it's going to work out. I mean, my question when my friend was telling me this was, well, what does 20,000 have to do with having a baby anyway? How does that play out? She's like, I have no idea, and so of course, me being the money person, well, it could be this and this and this, but really, I mean, they hadn't even had that conversation. So yeah, it's really about, reminding yourself and grounding yourself in this idea that, the universe is not out to get you. And a lot of that stuff, too, can go into, I think about Byron Katie. And I also like Colin Tipping, who does this course called Radical Forgiveness, and really goes into what is spiritual partnering and how do we reframe our perception of the people in the world around us to understand the lessons that we're trying to, that really we need to learn in this lifetime to move forward in a more peaceful way.
Yeah. Well, those were really great examples. I think I'm positive the listener can relate to at least one of those blocks. And like you said, look at how that pattern, if you resonated with a pattern, how does that pattern play out in your life? Like for me, getting back to, let's say, the throat chakra, culturally, I'm Asian. And I know just doing my own research, the things that I was carrying in my genetic line all relate to throat chakra, speaking your truth. Don't speak up, actually, is what's in the line. Don't speak up against the government. Don't speak up in your family. Be quiet. And what's interesting is also in my adoptive line, I noticed that throat chakra issues were so prevalent where it was religious oppression. You don't speak up. You don't do this. You don't question God. You don't. And then to take it even a step further, it goes to self-deprecation. Never be proud or happy or celebrate, the good things, lest you be prideful. And then once again, God's wrath is going to swoop in and, I don't know, hit you with a lightning bolt.
Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting how just, genetic, cultural, all these influences are going to play out, and money's just another way that it does.
It really is. Yeah.
So I love that you do this work. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
So what would you say to skeptics who don't believe in this chakra business and that it has any relevance?
Those people, they get to believe whatever they want to believe. And it's interesting what I find, what you said. So what you said just then sort of reminds me of when I would consult with other financial planners, because when I was getting this business up and running, after I sold my practice in that old broker-dealer world, they asked me to continue on as a consultant. Little did they know that I was using my life coaching techniques to consult through issues that they were having. And what I kind of laugh about is that if we had said, oh, Mindy's a life coach and she can help you work through some of these issues, they never would have booked an appointment. But because I called myself a practice management consultant, we got so much done. And so, yeah, my attitude is that, people can believe whatever they want to believe. What might be one person's lesson and somebody who might get a lot out of kind of the chakra stuff, there might be that there's another person that thinks this is a bunch of hooey, and maybe that's not his or her lesson for this lifetime. Maybe that there's something else that they are here to either provide or learn or take away. So yeah, I'm very much, not ever trying to force anybody, because my attitude about financial planning too is, not everybody in the world needs financial planning. So definitely, I think that there are enough people in both of those worlds that definitely there's plenty of work to be done and plenty of exploration to occur. But at the same time, I fully acknowledge that everybody in this world is on a different path, and this might not be useful to absolutely everybody.
And for any listener who might be desiring to try financial planning or get some perspective, but then thinking, oh, it's only for people with a lot of money, what advice or what would you say to them?
I would say that my least wealthy client only made $14,000 a year. She was working for a nonprofit. She made incredibly good use of her money. I was super impressed by her. And so for me, because I don't care about what people have to invest, I'm just getting people started. The whole how much money you have when you get here is completely irrelevant to me. It's really about the possibility and the education in the process. And at the same time, so my client who made the least amount of money was 14,000. My client that made the most was worth 15 million. So it really, what I found is that if somebody is attracted to financial planning or money block coaching, things like that, it really doesn't matter how much money you have, because the person that has 15 million has a lot of the same issues that the person that has 14,000. Yeah, showing up in a different way. So yeah, I find that these things are universal regardless of somebody's actual real world situation.
Yeah. And also based on my own experience and talking with friends, another deterrent is that they're going to be judged, like you mentioned earlier. So I really like that you have that perspective of you're going to align to what their values are. If they make 14,000, but just love that $10 latte every day, that you're not going to tell them to do things, but just align with what their values are and what they like to spend money on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you have a book with a great title called Personal Finance That Doesn't Suck. So who's your ideal reader for your book?
My ideal reader is... It's funny because sometimes I almost get too specific with this stuff. It's, marketing, branding stuff. But, I think about the single woman who probably has a career, has been working hard and not getting what she wants out of her financial life, or maybe hasn't even thought of her financial life. Because let's face it, it can be intimidating, and it's definitely something that you have to kind of stop and focus on amid all of the kind of crazy busyness that everybody's life takes. And so it's a person that is maybe kind of wanting to do more with her money, but not sure where to start, and is probably left cold by all of those kind of traditional personal finance books that tell you specific things that you don't even know if they relate to you or not. So definitely somebody who's looking to get started in a more mindful way, and somebody who's definitely inspired by the vision behind the money instead of just the nuts and bolts of where do I put this, what account, what investment.
Yeah, that sounds very relatable, because I think a lot of times the average person, such as myself, just feels a great divide between me and a financial planner.
Yeah. Well, and I can geek out with the best financial, the best of them with different accounts and stuff like that, but that's not really what motivates somebody to do better.
Yeah. All right, Mindy. Well, I love the work that you do, and I got so much out of this interview, and I'm sure the listener will too. And before I let you go, I was wondering if I could ask you just a few fun questions.
Yeah.
Get to know another side of you. So the first question is, what sort of music did you listen to as a teen?
Oh, man. That's so funny because I probably listened to the exact same music. So I always feel like I'm a little bit of the dork because before I kind of locked into some more recent music, like I used to love Queen, but before that, my mom's taste was what I took from. And so I listened to a ton of Cher and Captain and Tennille, which is super embarrassing. Yeah.
That's a first. I haven't had that answer yet.
That's so funny.
Captain and Tennille.
And then through high school, I got super into musical theater. And so I was constantly listening to soundtracks like Hair and Guys and Dolls. And oh man, what was another? Oh, The King and I.
Oh yeah. I love Broadway musicals.
Yeah. And so it got to be, not in high school, but in college, I would always do, one musical and a couple of regular plays every year. And so it seemed like for high school and college for a solid 8 years, I was usually working on some kind of, musical score kind of chorus or singing a lead or something like that. And so that's really what I associate kind of those years with, is a lot of musical theater stuff and imagining myself in different roles.
Do you still sing?
Only in the car.
Oh. Well, that's the best audience, so.
It really is. I never disappoint.
Yeah. All right. And then the second question is, what do you like to do on your day off?
Oh, man. I love to sleep in. And what I always feel like my week is very go, 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 go. And so even though one of my big priorities is all the time is health in a mindful way. So I'll sleep in and I'll get up and I'll go either take a walk around Green Lake or I'll go take a Pilates class and basically push the boundaries of when it's acceptable to actually be in normal clothes and makeup and go do other things. So so for me, it's very much about slowing the pace. That doesn't mean that I, get to skip the grocery store or picking up cat food or whatever, but it's really about slowing everything down so much so that I'm not like trying to check stuff off the list, that my day is happening organically. I love movies. I just love lying around and reading and, hanging out with people in really kind of laid back ways. So that's usually how I'm spending my time most of the time when I'm not working.
Any good books that you want to mention?
I am typically embarrassed by my book selection because,
oh, okay.
No, but I'll tell you, because a lot of times, I'll listen to a very kind of businessy book on tape as I'm driving around. But then for my relaxation, again, I was really informed by my mother because she really liked urban fantasy stuff. And she passed in 2012. And so as tribute to her, I was going back and looking at what are all the kind of series that she was looking at. And so there's one series called Magic Breaks by Ilona Andrews. And I'm obsessed with that. That series is almost done. Another writer that I love, her name is Patricia Briggs. And so she's got a couple of different series, urban fantasy stuff. So yeah, definitely when I'm trying to kind of relax and turn off my brain, I tend to go to urban fantasy.
Oh, nice. Sounds like that's a good way to recharge. So
totally.
Yeah. And then lastly, what's the number one thing on your bucket list?
To go to Paris. I have not done a huge amount of traveling in the past 10 years, and that's just one of those gorgeous places that is, I want to see much more of the world, but if somebody said you can only go one place in the next year, it would be Paris.
What is it about Paris?
I think it's almost the romance or almost so it's funny because I love old buildings. I love history. I love understanding the history of a place. And then you have flaky, yummy croissant pastry. So really, two of my favorite things in one place. How can I go wrong?
Yeah, that's one-stop shopping. I love it.
It really is.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again for doing this interview. And if the listener wants to do any coaching, now you are in Seattle, but would you do remote phone coaching or?
Yes, I do. I do virtual coaching. Well, I do virtual financial planning and virtual coaching for anyone, anywhere. So as long as the only time zone that I couldn't make work was actually somebody that was working in India. So,
okay.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, if we can make the time zones work, I'm up for phone coaching. So yeah, definitely.
Okay. And then what's the best way to contact you or find you?
You should go to my website, creativemoney.biz, and that has all the information about everything, intake form. And then the other thing that I thought I would do for you is after this, I'll go ahead and send you the links to those two kind of freebies I mentioned. One goes through kind of all of the chakras, and then the other one is getting started on conscious spending in 30 minutes or less. So I'll make sure that you've got those links too, because those are also great ways to get started too.
Thank you for listening to WooWoo for the Skeptic. I would love to hear from you about the show, or if you know of someone you would like to see interviewed. And if you enjoyed this episode on money coaching, please subscribe in your podcast app so that you never miss an episode. And now for your moment of woo. This quote comes from the famous Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, who said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." Have a great week, everyone.